All right, everyone, welcome back to Inherent Success Podcast, where this is your guide through self discovery and your healing journey. You hear a little bit about business, self health, wellness, fitness, all of the good stuff. And it's all about transformational stories. This is what you'll get here. And on today's episode, I have my good friend, Pamela Silva. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Emma. How are you? So excited to be here, to vent, to talk, to share. I'm here for it, so I'm excited.
Yes, welcome. Well, this is definitely a safe space where you can vent, share your thoughts, and just be your truest, authentic self. Yeah, welcome to the show. So, how are you feeling? How was your day?
Good. We're talking about how, I think every day in motherhood is so unpredictable, so I
Mm,
always try to give myself some grace. We could have 10 amazing straight days, and then you have one that just breaks you. And, just learning to kind of take those difficult days and learn from them and process them and acknowledge that there's going to be different type of days and that we're trying to grow from all of them, and we take the good and we take the bad ones, and you're just trying to process that. So it was one of those days where motherhood definitely taught me a lesson and challenged me, and I'm just trying to be better from it.
I love that. That's beautifully said. I think to me, my experience of motherhood is it really triggers you. Not to, I know triggering is like an icky word sometimes, but it triggers you because it really tests you, right? Like sometimes like you if you allow it, it can bring you out of character, or you can overthink things, or maybe you question like who you're being as a person and as a mother. And I think what I've learned in like being a mother and motherhood, especially my son being a teenager, is just like just taking it one day at a time. You don't have to be perfect. And yeah, just give yourself some grace. And also understanding, we were talking about this a little bit, is that they're their own humans. They have their own little brains and they get to develop their own little ways. And it's okay for them to make mistakes because that's how they're able to learn. It's like we want to hold them, right? And just like protect
Yeah.
them and make sure that they're not being hurt, or like, oh no, don't go that way. But sometimes you just kind of have to like let them go. Like I've learned that as like, my son being a teenager, like I've learned that I had to just let him go and let him learn things by himself so he'll be able to build character and like learn his own lessons so he knows what he can do for the next time if he learns this lesson, of course.
I know. I think now in the season when we talk about legacy, I feel like our children are such an important component of your legacy, and I think that sometimes puts an extra weight of pressure on us, right? Like this is my legacy, so you kind of want to do. For me, that's why motherhood is the most important job.
Mm-hmm.
Aside from everything else that I do, because this is part of your legacy, and you want to leave behind a good human that's self-sufficient. But also, in my personal experience, I want someone to be empathetic and just a good person. And I've had a really hard time. How do you teach being good, right? Like a lot of it is obviously by example, for me by prayer. But then at some point they do develop their own personality. Like even at 4 years old, how do you teach empathy? How do you teach remorse? How do you teach it's that's the part that I want to make sure that it's a good foundation. And at 4 years old, it's very hard to read remorse and to be able to tell if they're in the good, ethical, moral pathway of life. So that's the one thing that I'm over stressing. And I want to make sure that I get it right.
I agree 100%. I, especially now that my son's a teenager, that's like it's a different ball game. It's like, they're little adults and they're learning to maybe go into the real world and get jobs and all these things. And it's true what you say. It's like our children are the future. And one thing that I teach my son for sure, and I tell him, like, if there's anything that you can learn from me, is to be kind. Just be a good person, and
Yeah.
everything that you do, make sure that you do it with love, and don't be so like focused on, oh, I want to make money, I want to make money. It's like, who do you become to achieve that kind of money, right? And what are you able to do with that kind of money? It's a really important lesson to teach our children. It's like you said, they are the future. They are legacies, pretty much. Yeah. So yeah, Pamela, I would love for you to share with the audience, who you are. I mean, you're in the Latino world, you're very well known. But just to kind of like give everyone a little bit of your background, like what exactly do you do, and have people understand that?
Yeah, of course. I love talking about my professional journey. I know I went off into this personal one because I'm like in the thick of it. And again, I have said that that is the most important job for me. Like being sports mom is
Hmm.
definitely my priority. But I'm able to provide with for its sake and life through my professional career, which has been also a very blessed and amazing journey. I work for Univision, which is a Spanish network here in the US, and we are the largest Spanish network in the country. And I've been, lucky enough to grow and develop professionally within Univision for the last 21 years. And it has been my home. I literally have grown up with a lot of my coworkers and with my, professional team. And there's something special about growing with a team, right? Because it's like you become a family. You've been through the ups, the downs, the transitions, the changes, the evolution of television. So right now I anchor a 5 p.m. network show called Primer Impacto, First Impact in English, but it's a news magazine. It airs Mondays through Fridays. I'm live from 5 to 6 p.m. Um, and Primer Impacto really is a household name for like Latino families. It's been around for 30 years. I joined that team about 12 and a half years ago. Yeah, almost 13 years. And it has been amazing. It's really a blessing to find a mission and purpose in your work, right? So I have been able to find purpose within this team with the content that we create. So we do a now 1 hour show. We usually do news of the day. We were the original like viral video gimmick and concept. We do very visual graphic images at the beginning of the show. We also have sports, we have weather, we have health segments, we have an entertainment segment, and then we usually close it out with a human interest story, right? So either someone that we're helping, or a family that we're helping, or a cold case that we're trying to solve, or a child that we're trying to find that's missing. So we're trying to really use the closing platform to kind of like help the community, right? To make a difference, to have a big impact. So it's great to find purpose in your work, right? And to know that we have this platform to like make a huge difference, and that we don't take that for granted. So again, before I got to Primer Impacto, I've been with Univision as a local reporter. I did weather, I did entertainment, I've been a producer, I've been a correspondent, and I have had the blessing of doing so many roles that I think have allowed me to strengthen my current role. So I have a better sense of all the perspectives and all the roles that involve my program now. So yeah, that's what I do.
I love that. It so I was born and raised in Miami. I'm first generation born here. So I grew up watching Univision, Primer Impacto, and like all of that. And like I saw also too in your bio that you worked in Gordo y la Flaca. So I was like, oh my
Yeah,
God, I used to watch that show. I
yeah,
remember my grandma would watch me, or even my mom, and we would like they had that on all day, and that's all I would watch. So it's funny. My mom watches my podcast, so she's probably going to see this and be like, "Hi, Mira." She's going to be like,
I love
"Oh, oh
it.
my God, you interviewed Pamela."
Yeah, and it's nice
Literally.
to be. Reality is like, especially Hispanic homes, we
Hmm.
tend to have a lot of generational homes, right? Which means like the grandma's there, the mom's there, the kids are there.
Hmm.
So the grandkids, grandma, mom dynamic makes us very, like three generations in one household. But which means that our viewers tend to be very young because they're exposing their young kids to our content, to our news format. And again, it's a great responsibility to be like a household brand within the Hispanic market. We don't take that for granted. We know it's a big responsibility. Even the relationship that we have with our viewers is very unique. We have, like you said, like families have grown up watching our programs. I grew up watching Univision. Univision was always my dream job. Like I manifested it, I visualized it, it happened. I never take for granted that I'm living the dream that I manifested at some point in my life. And I think that's what keeps me motivated and inspired and aggressively committed to my work, right? Because I never take that for granted. Like every day that I drive into my building, I am grateful that I am, and I never forget what it felt like when I first got this position. I remember it was like fifth. It was a 5th of July, and I was a lot. I was very nervous. I had a lot of pressure on my shoulder. I had to deliver, and that feeling of excitement, like I never allow it to die. Like every time I go on the air, and we do live TV, so it's like a little bit of like a rush to it. Like I never want that to die. I never want the magic and the illusion and the sense of like magic and gratitude to ever fade. And I think that's something that intentionally I need to keep alive, like the flame. Um, and I think that's really what motivates us, to like rally up and like do it with the same passion that we do and to like keep being competitive and aggressive and like, in a good way, obviously, like in a healthy way. And I advise everyone like to find a work that gives you purpose, but also that gives you that fire within, and I know it's not it's easier said than done. But I remember one time I have a younger sister who's 10 years younger. She lives in New York, and she did this fellowship with NBC, the page called the Page Program. When she was done with that, she got an amazing job with a PR firm out of Lower Manhattan. She was like living the New York life, in her early 20s. And one day, when I'm having dinner in New York, she's like, "Listen, by the way, I gave my 2-week notice." And I was like, "Okay." I'm like, "What offer did you get?" She's like, "Well, I don't have an offer, but I don't have that fire. Like I'm walking into an office where I don't feel, appreciated. I'm just kind of like, getting it's good work, it's good pay, it's very prestigious, but I don't love going to work, and I feel like it's a toxic environment for me." And I was like, "What?" Like I've been working since I was 14 years old. I've never like left the job without another job in the back, and I also have a more old school mentality for like the financial security of it. And I remember she said, "Well, you love your job, and back then, like your husband loves your job, his job. I want to walk in and love what I do, and if right now it doesn't look like this is what I'm loving, then it's okay. I'll do whatever it takes. Like I'll be a server, I'll do whatever. Like I'll figure it out. But in the meantime, I want to love what I do, and I don't not loving going into work every day." And again, maybe it's a different approach. I've learned a lot from her as well. And I was like, you know what, you're right. And I don't take that for granted. I know that I love what I do, but I know that a lot of people don't. And a lot of people don't have the courage to do what my sister did, which is like, risk it. Screw it. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'll figure it out. But all I know is that I'm not loving what I'm doing. And this is not healthy for me.
Mm.
So, yeah.
No, I love that because, and I can totally relate because there has been certain things that I was working in where I thought that it, and that's what I want to do for the rest of my life. And you realize like you lose passion for it because one, I mean, it's probably repetitive or it was exciting at one point and then it wasn't. And sometimes, at least for me, like my experience in my previous job, I was so obsessed with it and it was because of the money. Like when you're making a certain amount of money, you just kind of like become drawn to it and you're like, I want more and I want more and I want more. So that was my mentality of just like, okay, like I'm just going to keep doing this cuz let's see where it goes, and then it will kind of like suppress what I'm truly meant to do, like my true calling. And I know that feeling that she had, that feeling of like, okay, like I don't feel that fire anymore. And that's what happened to me recently, actually. Like I don't feel that fire anymore, but I'm just clocking in because I'm clocking in. Like I'm doing this job because I have to do this job because I have to pay my bills. I still have a job, but a better job that's more in alignment with what I'm looking for and like how I want to grow as an individual. Um, but I get that 100%. I think in life, like sometimes you go through these different vehicles and these different paths, and you think just you're just on that one path. I mean, thankfully, thank God, like you were blessed with this opportunity and you love it and you continue to do it and you have passion. But when you lose that passion, it just means you're not in alignment with what you're doing at that time. So it's okay if you have to go a different path. You know what I mean? So I get when she says, "Oh, I just didn't feel that fire." That's how I felt with my previous job. I just wasn't feeling that fire, and it was also suppressing my true calling, which is doing this podcast, right? And or coaching people and doing all the things. But no, it's so true. It's like sometimes the best work is one in the work that you've been avoiding, and the best work is something that you think that you weren't capable of doing, but you wouldn't have known if you didn't take the risk of stop like quitting, not quitting, but just closing that chapter on that other thing that you were working on, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, and again, reality is I am in an industry that's constantly changing. So like we would say this is what we do, but we try not to make it who we are. And it's so easy to fall into that blurry space of like, this is like not who I am. This is not my full identity. But because you've been doing it for so long and because it's really is part of your, like so much of your life, it kind of blends in. So it's like really grounding yourself and trying to find that balance between what I do and who I am. And I think after becoming a mom, it became a little bit more clear as to like what I am, what my purpose is, and what I do for a living. And kind of like defining those two worlds was very important to me, to be able to find the balance between like what's important, and what's a priority, and what really, identifies me as a person.
I love that. Yeah, I agree. So, were you always into like what did you always want to be a journalist? Like how did you grow up? Like what got you into wanting to be in a
Yeah, so
journalist? Yeah.
I think part of why I was so blessed to get into the industry so young is because I really had I was very determined as to what I wanted to do. I was blessed enough, very lucky to identify what I wanted to do very early on. And I always say that's like I give that a lot of credit because a lot of the times, which is okay, we take a lot, people tend to take a long time to figure out what they want to do. We always get pressured into like in high school, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to do? What are you going to be? What's your major? Like we're society's always pressuring us into like selecting what we want to do for like the rest of your life. So some people struggle, which is okay. And I think for me, I was very clear on what I wanted to do. So, and I think the love for television, was instilled in me like a little seed when I was young. So I was born in Peru. And when I was about 7 years old, my mom remarried and she moved to the States. I stayed behind with my grandmother in Peru and she came to the States. And eventually, 3 years later, we were able to reunite after all the immigration paperwork. It took forever. Like we were considering like all the ways to like reunite. But finally, 3 years later, we're able to, get everything settled and I was coming to the States. But I knew back then I was very close to my grandma, who was really the person who raised me like most of my childhood. I was not going to see her anymore. And back then we did not have FaceTime or, we didn't have cell phones. Then we're talking about like the early 90s, right? So ironically, there was this very popular international show called Sábado Gigante. And in Peru, where I'm from, every Saturday night we would gather in my grandmother's living room to watch
I
this
remember that
program.
show.
That when I fly to the States, a few maybe like a year into it, my mother goes, "Guess what? There's an audition for Sábado Gigante. That show that you used to watch in Peru is taped right here in Miami." And in my mind, I need to get on that show because it's the only way that my grandmother in Peru would be able to see me. In my mind, I was like, that's the only way. I need to get on that show so that my grandma could see me. It had been a year already since I hadn't seen her. And I missed her so much, and she missed me dearly. I remember we used to send like greeting cards all the time. Like once a month, I would send her a card, or she would send me a card. We would talk on the phone, like I want to say like once a month because it was very expensive to talk on the phone internationally back then. Anyhow, so auditions come out. I audition for the show. I get on the show, and a month later, I get a call back, and eventually, my whole neighborhood sat in front of my grandma's TV and watched me for the first time after like a year that I hadn't seen anyone. And I got casted to do like a little newscast for kids. And that back then, I realized the impact of television. Like, how am I here in Miami? And I had my whole family, my neighborhood, my everyone watching me in Peru because I'm on this show. Like the power of television to me was like at 10 years old or 11, it like blew my mind. And I was like, that's what I want to do. Like, I know the impact of it. I want to connect people. I want to be able to like, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew that I wanted to be on TV, have an impact, and have a reach that I had. So that's really where the love for television grew. So I was on that show when I was like 10, 11 years old. Eventually, I grew up, I went to college, and I always knew that I wanted to tell stories. So I actually originally was a newspaper, a print journalist major. And one of my professors said, look, you know what, you should look into doing broadcast journalism. So I switched my major. I did broadcast journalism. And then like a year before graduating, I ended up getting a part-time with Univision. Um, so again, I think for me, the true was the love. Obviously, I fell in love with television and the impact that it could have. But then eventually, I just wanted to tell stories, and that's still what I do. I tell people stories, and I'm very curious. I love to like talk to people. I love to build relationships, and like even like this evoking thing, like that's all we do. We question people. We want to like everyone has a great story. Like everyone has a story worth telling. It's just like being able to like open up. How do you tell it? And really finding a purpose to that story, right? Not just to like say a story to tell it. It's more like, what do you want to do with this story? Like, what's the message behind it? Like, what do you want to inspire someone? Do you want to warn someone? Do you want to just like
Mhm.
change someone's perspective about something? So I think it's like finding the purpose of storytelling, and just like that's really what we do.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's interesting that you said evoking. It's kind of like similar like what we're learning in our process. So just so you guys know, like I met Pamela through a leadership workshop that we're currently going through, and it's truly amazing and it's very transformative. And we've been learning a lot of things of, like leadership and storytelling and like all basically like enrolling people into their vision. And
And
that's
also
what's
creating like true connection. I think like a lot of the
yeah.
time, especially like in this fast-paced world, we're so used to wired to just have superficial, like surface level relationships.
Mhm.
And I think this
Mhm.
has really taught us to like really be present, really connect, really like when you're talking to someone, like really get deep into like their vision and their dreams and like their aspirations. And then that in return helps you like sub-analyze, like, okay, am I living like, is this aligned with the vision that I want? Is this aligned with the values that I have? Is this aligned with the integrity
Mhm.
I'm trying to show? So it's definitely been like a win-win for everyone, right? Like you're helping people, I guess, achieve or visualize their dreams, but you also in the process learning to be honest with yourself and seeing if this is like really aligned with what you want.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%. And I guess I would love for you to talk on building confidence because what I've realized is, especially me like growing up as well, and confidence is something that's really huge, right? And it's a huge struggle for especially women. Um I think well maybe like a mix of like women and men, like building confidence. So how, being young and getting cast on, Sábado Gigante, right? And then also like going into this TV world, like how were you able to build confidence and what were the pivotal moments? How were you able to build confidence and like what was like the most challenging thing for you getting into this process?
Well, I definitely think that women and raising girls is a lot more challenging sometimes, and when in terms of confidence than men, because of all the societal stereotypical things that we have, right? And I always tell my mother raised two girls, my sister and I, and in the most humble way, I think she did an amazing job. Especially, I think with my sister, it was like an upgraded version of me. Um, because raising women, you want them to be confident but not arrogant. You want them to be
Mhm.
kind but not like a pushover. You want them to be again confident but not like a bitch. You want them to. It's like such a fine line when it comes to raising, you know, females, like ladies, women, and I think the sense of confidence. I think number one for me, and I always give credit to my mother, is having a good hype person, which now I've turned it into having a good support group, having women that are believing in you, that are giving you honest feedback, that want the best for you, and really being intentional about like who is. I always say this is like your board of directors of your personal life, right? Like you have to be very
Mhm.
selective about who are you surrounding yourself with, who are your mentors, who are your advocates, who are your sponsors in life, and really, again, be very selective and intentional. And for me, I was very lucky to have a mom that believed in me, that always, in the eyes of my mother, my sister and I were always the smartest, the prettiest, and I think that also the narrative that she created was so believable that I believed it, and I always tell her, like, your words were so important because we were wired to think we saw ourselves, you saw us. And that made a huge difference. And I know that a lot of people don't have that privilege. And I never take that for granted either. And I want to repeat that. And I'm so careful with my words, especially with the words that I tell myself now. Because we could be so harsh on ourselves and we could be so like self-sabotaging, degrading, that we need to really be careful with the narrative that we're creating. So I haven't built on the one that my mother built, which was a good foundation. And also, I remember, like, now that you mentioned the Sábado Gigante, at 10 years old, I remember I got off in the car and I saw this huge line. To me, it seemed like 500 kids. Maybe it was 100, but in my mind, that line looked eternal. And I told my mother, I'm not doing this. Like, I've had no experience. I don't know what this is. Like, no way. And she looked at me and she's like, listen, I already took the day off, so you're showing up. I already, like, spent
No choice.
on this, like, outfit that I bought you. And there's, like, it's Marshall's, like, this store that, like, you look amazing. Like, I put my savings into this little outfit you're wearing. And on top of that, this was, like, the lesson that I learned. Don't ever tell yourself no. If someone else tells you no, you showed up. But you not even give yourself the opportunity to get in line, to show up, to do whatever. Like, how fair is that? Like, don't let yourself be your first no in the process. That makes zero sense. Like, you have to be your first yes. Again, you're going to get no's along the way, but you can be your first no. And your first no is not even trying, not showing up. I'm not doing this. So I will never allow you to be your first no in the process. And she was right? Like, why would I not grant myself the opportunity to try something, to swing at something, And I stood in line and, ended up working out in that moment. And I've kept that throughout my whole process. Like, let me try. Like, I'm not going to be my first no. I'm going to be my first yes. Yes, I'm showing up. Yes, I'm going to try. Yes, I'm going to prepare. I think preparation has really given me a lot of confidence, because when I don't prepare, I don't perform as well. And that's reality. A lot of it has to do with people like, oh, but is it luck? Is it whatever? I think it's a combination of everything.
All right, guys, we'll get right back into the episode. I just wanted to take a quick break here to share with you guys that I do not make any money on this podcast. My goal and my purpose with Inherent Success is to be that guide for individuals in their self-discovery journey. So if you found any value in this episode, make sure to like, to subscribe. And if you know anyone that could benefit from the episode or the podcast overall, you can share with a friend as well. Now, let's get back into it.
I think you got to be the most prepared. I prepare. The most, I always say, rested, because that also, and I think these are factors when I talk about confidence, I always think of it like, okay, if I'm showing up for a casting, for an audition, for an interview, for a speaking engagement, for an interview, I need to have all this aligned since I was very little, and I danced a lot when I was growing up, and that also showed me a lot about no's, auditioning, being picked, being chosen, being rejected, being whatever. Like, all those processes are life lessons that you take along the way. So when I would audition for dance teams when I was younger, I realized that it's kind of the same pattern. You have to prepare. You have to be well rested, have a clear mind, and believe in yourself. Like, be your first yes. I'm believing this. I tell myself, like, the narrative in my mind has to be very strong, because if not, like, you're starting off in from a very weak foundation. Like, your foundation, you're grounded, believe in yourself, how prepared you are. And I always say, like, you give 100%, and then the rest, you have to surrender. So it's like, you give it all, and then the rest you surrender, in my case, to God, to whoever you relate to, the universe. But that to me has worked, and I think has really helped me be grounded start at least a process from a very confident foundation.
Yeah, it ultimately comes down to like, are you willing to put in the reps, right? Like, are you willing to put in the reps and put in the practice in order to learn those skills and build, excuse me, and build that confidence? Because maybe you come across something that you may not know the material yet. I mean, I was a dancer too and a cheerleader too, but it's like I wasn't great when I started. But the only way that you get great is by continuing to go to practice, continuing to put in those reps. And
The
also,
irony of it, and it's funny you say this because I never really thought I was the best one in my team, but I always acted like I was the best one. Like when I showed up to audition,
mhm,
like and we used to get the score at the end, like I scored very highly, and I knew I wasn't the best dancer. I wasn't
mhm,
like like the most beautiful. It was like there was something again
yeah,
in my mindset where I believed that I was the best. That for some reason people got confused and they believed the same thing, but in reality,
mhm,
I know that I wasn't. I don't have like an and it's funny because I just interviewed Eva Mendes during her book, and she always said this: I know that I don't have an extraordinary talent. I just have a mom who believed that I did. And in return,
mm,
I started acting like I did. And I think that a lot of that has to do with that. Like how you show up and how you perform and how you deliver makes a big difference because there's going to be people that are going to be more talented, better prepared, better pedigree, better whatever. But it's like how they show up, like how are you showing up and, you know, embodying, I think that oozing that self-confidence. I think that really is the game
mhm.
changer in a lot of things.
Yeah, yeah. It's definitely an energy thing when it comes to like an energy. Having that energy is a huge component when it comes to confidence. I do agree with you on that. But not a lot of women and men feel that way. You know, like in order for they think that okay, I haven't achieved this thing, therefore I'm not this certain way or I'm not at this level yet, so I'm not confident. So I think like what would really be supportive for people because I was the same way growing up. Like I wanted to join a dance team and so did my sister and we wanted to try out for cheerleading because my mom didn't inspire me to do all of that. Like we pushed ourselves. And going in there, I was like, okay, I got this. Like I had the confidence, that energy of like, I'm not the best, but I'm going to show up like I am the best. Show up the best me that I can be. And I think when people have it mixed up and thinking like, oh, I don't know this thing, so I'm not going to do it. It doesn't matter. You're going to eventually learn. You just got to be willing to put yourself out there, be willing to like go through the trenches, be willing to just fall on your face and then get back up and do it again. And that's essentially how you learn. And when you're learning, you develop those skills, the different skills that you're looking to develop, and that's how you gain the confidence. Because I think there's this huge misconception of like self sabotage, right? There's so many different meanings around self sabotage, and I think self sabotage it's like a it's I don't I want to see what your opinion is on this because I've been listening to a lot of things when it comes to self sabotage. So I don't think it's self sabotage. I think it's more of like, okay, like you're right. I don't know how to write a book. Just throwing examples out there, right? And yeah, you don't know how to write a book. It's not really self-sabotage. It's facts. You don't know how to write a book. However, you can develop the skills to learn how to write a book so you can be able to have the confidence to be like, yeah, I can write a book. I think self-sabotage like just kind of like gets a little lost in translation because yes, it can be an energy thing of like I'm not enough, I'm not worthy and all this stuff, but then I think there's like a limit to it. It's like, okay, yes, there you can shift that energy. You are worthy, you are enough, you're capable of doing this. But if you don't know something, it doesn't mean that you're not capable of learning it. It just means, and it doesn't mean you're self sabotaging yourself. It just means that you just got to learn the skill. You got to learn the material.
Yeah, I mean, this also has to be a component of being honest with yourself and knowing your strength and weaknesses, right? That's also like a
Mm-hmm.
learning process. I think we also don't want to stand in a position of denial and delusion, right? Because that's also a dangerous zone. It's like the very uh,
Yeah.
specific difference between like believing that you're the best and then also like not being aware. Like there's a lot of self-awareness in this
Mm-hmm.
process that's very critical to succeeding, right? You also have to be very self-aware, and I always acknowledge, like, okay, what are my weaknesses? And whatever you're weak at, you got to overcompensate. Either you got to work harder, like, again, going back to, I think dancing is such a like life lesson for me. Again, I was not the most flexible dancer in the world, and we had to do jump splits, when I was with the Dolphins. What does that mean? That means I have to go in an hour earlier, warm up, work with the trainer, and be able to do my jump split. Sometimes also is like, okay, you're weak at this, but let's really highlight all your strengths so that it kind of like balance off. So I always think, like, don't also like kill yourself trying to become or fix something or acquire something that it's going to be very hard for you when you could actually work on something that you're already good at and maybe really elevate that. So I think it's a combination of both, but really being self-aware of like what you're good at, excellent at, and what you're not that great at, and then figuring out how you're going to find that good balance.
100%. I agree with that 100%. I think you like put the nail on the head. I think that's how you say it. I probably mixed up that term, but you hit the nail on the head. That's how you say
Yeah.
it. It's so true. It's like having that difference, knowing the difference between, yes, believing in yourself, but also like don't be arrogant and think that you know it all and think that, like, okay, I'm going to do this, and I'm not willing to learn. I'm not willing to develop the skills and to learn how to get better and all these things. So I think that's also like it's the same thing with personal development. Like there's a difference between being, personal development and self-awareness. Like you can be personal developed, like, right, like you can read all the books and you can go to the seminars, you can go to all the workshops, but if you're not really embodying everything that you're learning and applying everything that you're learning, then it's just self-development. You're not really self-aware.
And also, like, when you say about the self-awareness, I also want to, like, just to share a little like anecdote. I think also is finding support. Okay, like if I'm not great at one thing, if I'm not great at like editing, right? Like that's not my strength. Like let me work with the best editor. Like let me find someone that's like really good at where I'm like not that great at, and have like the humility to be like, hey, I need help in this area. Like let me support myself with the best of the best. And I think good leaders usually hire very strong leaders themselves, because they're self-confident that they're going to like complement you and they're not going to overshadow you. It's about building a team that's going to kind of like help you balance where you're not that great at. That's really what good leaders do. And it's okay to ask for help and support, especially in the areas where you're not that amazing at. um so for me, that really also has been, made a huge difference, like really being humble and saying, hey, I struggle in this area. Like let me really find the best of the best, so either teach me, support me, guide me, or just compliment me as when we do like collaborative work. And I want the best of the best, and if I'm not great in this one, I want someone else who is, so that we could like make a better team.
Back to what you were saying in regards to like getting help in certain areas that you need improvement in, it's really important to, and I see this a lot where there are successful people that have fixed mindsets and they're not open for growth. They're not open to learn. They're not open to just like really evolve as an individual, or like evolve with their team or evolve with their family. Um, when I see that, it's like, it's really sad, because it's like, man, like you're already an amazing leader. You're already an amazing person. And with having a fixed mindset, it just keeps you like at a certain level. Like you don't really elevate. It just keeps you like right there at the minimum.
I also, it
I
takes a
also, it
lot of
takes a lot
work
of work
and a
and
lot
a
of
lot.
courage to be always learning, right? I think especially when you've been doing something for so long, it's very easy to be like, okay, I know it all, I'm comfortable, whatever. And I think at some point that catches up to you. I think you have to constantly be putting in the work, constantly be improving, always be learning, always be getting like, you know, whatever that looks like in your field. If that looks like a seminar, if that looks like an extra certification, that looks like, going, getting another, teacher or tutor for something, or again, whatever that may look like in your industry, I think constantly growing and learning has to be part of the process if you're going to continue to, let's say, not only succeed, because let's say you reach success in your definition, but really stay relevant, right? So at some point, that success is not going to be enough, and someone else is going to be. So you have to be able to like be okay with the evolution, with growing, with learning, with resetting yourself, with reinventing yourself a little bit. So it's like it's a constant process. Like I think every day that you get comfortable doing whatever you're doing is like another reason to be like, oh wait a minute, no, let me look into like how could I improve? What are they doing differently now? What's new? What's happening? What's a new approach? Or what else can I learn? Um, and a lot of people may question you. You know, when I did my MBA, I was already anchoring. I was a correspondent like then. I hadn't started Primer Impacto, and I was like, you know what? I think it's like a good time to do a master's in business. Like I've done communications my whole life. I did journalism for undergrad. I did bilingual communication for a first graduate certificate. And I was like, you know what? I want to do something different. But more than anything, I want to socialize with someone different than what I do every day. At that point, I had been in the media for so long. My husband back then was in the media as well. So we were all like communication, media. Like it was all it was that we were like in a bubble. And I really wanted to have a different perspective from different people. And for me, doing the MBA, doing this master's in business, really gave me an outlet, a creative outlet to see how people look at things differently, right? Like, and I think that's the reason of that the main purpose of learning. Like, you're learning how to process things in a different way, but more than anything, you're learning how do other people process things, right? Because you want to be a good leader, and you want to be able to see how different people and other people in your team are going to analyze things, you're going to process things, you're going to solve things also. So that experience for me was very, very humbling because I had to like, I'm like, how did I forgot math, but then I remembered it. It was like riding a bike. And it was completely different from my my day-to-day job. But I really enjoyed it mainly because it challenged me to look at things differently, to have dialogues that were not within my same bubble, to have conversations that were about different things. And every time I do something, a learning process outside of my work, I will make sure that that it includes a diversity of people, different perspective, different backgrounds, different industries. And it's been enjoyable, and it's been also a great learning process.
Yeah, yeah. And change is uncomfortable. And not a lot of people are willing to be comfortable with change, right? So especially like those successful people that just kind of like stay in their bubble, and they're in their they stay in their ways, they stay in that bubble, and they just continue to have that circle of influence, right? Like instead of just branching out like what you did, getting your NBA, like branching out, getting different perspectives, getting advice. A lot of people are not willing to do that. Like there's cause sometimes I feel like it just comes to a point where there's like a level of being comfortable where you're at, and like you're okay with where you're at. And it's like also some people think, okay, I'm at an 8, so I'm good. I don't need to be a 10. And it can be very detrimental to you. It's like why are you not willing to grow in different areas of your life? You know what I mean? So having a fixed mindset, I just think it just sets a lot of people back, no matter what level you are in your life.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely.
And a
Hmm.
lot
And a
of
lot of
people
people
are going
are
to
going
question,
to.
like, why are you doing that? Like, you're good. Like, you're okay. Like, what's the need for that? Like, oh my God, why the sacrifice? Like, why are you putting out there? And they're gonna be those like voices, those like nerds, that are gonna like bring you down and question you, like question why you want to grow and learn and do something different. Like, oh my God, that's so weird. And like, but you also have to have the courage and self-discipline to be like, I don't care what you're saying. Like, I'm doing this for myself and for my own. And like, that's why I always tell people, like, make sure it's something that you really enjoy. It's going to be challenging, but at the end of the day, you have to find the joy behind it, find the excitement behind it, because if not, it's not going to be worth your time. Like we've learned in this process as well, like fun gets it done. Like, you want to be able to do something that you enjoy, even if that looks like, I want to learn how to ballroom dance. I'm this stage in my life, I want to do whatever. And whatever that is, there has to be some joy behind it. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but I think it does. I think that's one requirement. It has to be something that brings you joy to some extent.
I agree. And it's interesting because when you said that, because I was thinking like, yeah, like a lot of people mostly do things for money, and then when it gets hard, they end up quitting. And yes, money is a great motivator. It's like oxygen. We need money, right? But that's the byproduct of what your truest work is. Like when you're working on something, having that the abundance, right? Like you receive that the money abundantly in your life, like it's the byproduct, but it's not the only reason why like you're doing what you're doing. You have to love what you're doing. Like it's just point blank. Like I believe it so much, and there has to be a purpose in what you're doing, right? Like I mean, I don't make money with these podcasts, but I do it because I love it. I do it because I know people out there that are seeking change need guidance. They need help, right? They need that I don't know, that extra push and that extra motivation through like their healing journey or their self-discovery journey. Like people just trying to figure out who do they want to become, like what do they want to do with their lives, and this is a perfect platform. This is a perfect way to contribute to that, right? So that's why I do it. Yes, of course, monetizing it, that's great and that I get to learn those things, but I think what really is the driver here is like, is it your calling? Is it your purpose? Is it your passion? Is this what you really want to do? Kind of like what with the work that you do. It's like, are you really going to be in it for the money, or are you going to do it for because you're passionate about it? Like you're saying, you
Yeah.
love telling stories.
And again,
And
like
again, like
there's
there's
seasons in our
seasons in
life
our
where you
life.
do work that you perhaps didn't love. But what I did learn at my first job ever was at a fast food restaurant where we served chicken. It's called Pollo Tropical. I was 15 years old. It was the only job that I could get at 15 because at the mall you had to be 16, and I really wanted to work because I needed the money. So I had a friend from chemistry was like, hey, by the way, I heard you want to start working. Like I work at this place. They could hire you at 15. You could only work certain hours, but I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And I learned back then, and my mom also gave me this advice. Such a wise woman, my mother, I love her. She's like, you know what? Whatever you do, you have to do with integrity and with pride. If you're selling chicken and you're cleaning the floor and you're doing drive-through, like you want to do it with grace and integrity and just like a lot of feel proud. Like if you're gonna do that, you're gonna be the best at it. And I went every day with that attitude. And I remember I left my little uniform and I had a little hat and we wore a little ribbon. And I found so much pride in like, okay, this is what I'm doing. I'm going to be the best. Like my goal is to be the drive-through cashier, in a month. And that's what it was when I got a little headset and I was a drive-through cashier. It was like a big highlight for me. And it just shows you that eventually I had two more friends from school, from my high school, join me at work. And we all worked together and it was fun. Because when you have joy and you have pride in whatever you do, it's contagious and people want to be part of that. Whatever it is, they want to be part of it. And again, I was always like, whatever I was doing, I wanted to be the best at because it makes a difference on how you perform, on how other people approach you. And those are just attitudes and aptitudes that you pick up and you learn that you could apply eventually when you do have your dream job. So I just want to make sure, like, reality is we have to pay our bills and we have to figure it out. And there's going to be work that we're not going to love. But if you have to do that, you have to always find like a way to find joy and
And
pride in
pride in.
what you're doing.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that as well. I mean, ultimately, that's true. Like, whatever you do, give it to the max of your ability, right? And and there is like a separation of like, okay, like do what you love, do whatever you do it with do it. Okay, whatever you do, make sure that you love what you do and it's a passion of yours, like long term. But of course, anything that you do, right? I know that I'm the same way. Whatever job I have, I do it to the max of my ability. Whatever I do it to the max of my ability. Just like with this leadership process that we're going through, I'm doing it to the max of my ability, even since I was on an empty tank, but I'm learning not to do that. But um, yeah, just really doing it to the best of your ability. And some people don't have that type of character doing that. It took me a while to develop that. I think after I had my son, because I started working when I was 14, but those jobs, I didn't really do it to the max of my ability because I didn't really care. I didn't really have a role model growing up. So I had to learn a lot of things by myself and the hard way. So I didn't do that. And then once I became a mother, I was like, okay, I get to be a role model for him. I get to change myself. I get to work on myself. So he never has to worry about anything ever again. So around that time, like I had him when I was 18, but like when I was like 21 or 22, that's when I got a job. I did it to the max of my ability. Every job I had, I would do it to the max of my ability, even if it wasn't my passion. So that's a very huge component to have and to remember when you're doing something. That's great. But also like just making sure that whatever you do long term, just make sure you love it. Make sure you
Yeah,
have
no,
passion for it.
definitely. I would say, and like just to close it off, I would say like it's very there's gonna be temporary, jobs that you probably have to do to like pay the bills to get whatever. But also be very clear, like once you identify what your ultimate goal is, what your dream job is, what your purpose is, you have to, as soon as you do that, be very focused on that. And then eventually, whatever is detouring you from that, you have to be able to like say no to the temptation because there's going to be economic temptation, like, oh, but this is more secure. This is like whatever. But is it aligned to like where you're trying to go? And I'll give a quick example. When I was part time at Univision, I got a job with a radio station to host the morning show. And I went to my general manager back then and I asked him, can you please give me clearance? I want to be able to work part time here at Univision because it's my dream company. But in the morning, I want to be full time with another radio station. And he was like, I'm sorry, we have radio stations. It's a conflict of interest. I cannot allow you. And I remember thinking, oh my God, but this is like, I'm going to be full time. I'm going to have health insurance. I'm going to be like more financially stable. And I remember he asked me, do you want to do radio? And I was like, no, I want to do TV. Okay. He's like, okay, so don't get distracted by by this like temptation if that's not eventually what you want to do long term. Like trust me, it's not great right now, but I believe in you, believe in me, and in the long term it's gonna pay off. But right now I cannot let you take this. I can't let you take this full time. If you want to stay with us, if you want to take that, go ahead and leave, but you can't stay, work for us and then work for the competition. And I thought about it and I said I trusted him and I said okay. So I said no. I remember I cried because I was like, oh my God, like, and eventually that radio show got canceled 6 months later. Eventually I got the next day he made me full time. Again, not a great salary, but it was at least full time. I had health insurance. And eventually, I got promoted and I became a reporter and it ended up working out. But I thought it was such an important lesson to say, okay, I'm not going to get distracted. Once you identify eventually what you want to do long term and that's your passion, like focus on that. Whatever is like not aligned with that, try not to get distracted.
I love that. Yeah. Ignore all the extra stuff. And speaking of radio, I know we're pressed on time here, but I know you've mentioned that your goal is to work on your podcast. So what is your vision and for the audience to hear more about your podcast that you're working on?
I have a podcast that we developed 50-50. I have a podcast that I developed when I became a mom. It's called Motherish, Motherish. And it was a passion project that actually became, another side project for my co-anchor and I that we love. And more than anything, we found it to be a very authentic, creative outlet for both of us. And I think people picked up on the authenticity and like the safe space for it. And our goal right now is to like grow it. We're thinking of relaunching it in Spanish, and it's like definitely in a new season because we have developed as moms. We're new seasons in our lives personally. So I would say whatever your passion project is, it has to really be authentic and really reflect where you are in life. And right now we're both in transition. So we definitely are trying to like align that with all the changes that we have experienced.
I love that. That's amazing. I can't wait for you to launch it so I can watch it. Awesome. That sounds beautiful. And one last question for you, Pamela. I know you have to go.
I have to jump. So she's calling, but
yeah. So one last question for you. This is something that I asked to all of my guests as well, just to hear your perspective. So what does inherent success mean to you?
I think inherent success is whatever you build through sacrifice and hard work. I think it doesn't happen overnight. I think it's also with a lot of patience. I think, it's something that is ever changing also. Like success is going to look different in different seasons of your lives, and you have to be okay with that. And also be okay with not settling with what success meant to you 5 years ago or a year ago. Let your allow yourself to constantly be upgrading and updating your dream and what your definition of success is, because in the long term it's just like the result of whatever work you're doing, and hopefully you're doing work and you're learning and you're growing, through different seasons of your lives.
Thank you. That was beautiful. Everyone says something so different. I love it.
I
Awesome,
love it.
Pamela. Well, where can people find you? Where
Yeah,
can people look for
so
you?
Instagram at Pamela Silva. Also, the podcast Instagram is at Motherish. And of course at Univision. So again, I'm on from 5 to 6 every day on Univision in Spanish. And Motherish is an English product that we have, and it's in all the platforms for podcasts that you can listen to. And it's a different perspective. I think people get to know a different Pamela from the one that they see on TV. So it's like a nice little balance.
Love it. And I'll add all of her info where you can connect with Pamela in the description.
Thank you.
Pamela, thank you so much for
Thank you.
joining us tonight. Oh my
Emma.
God, you're so awesome. So, thank you guys so much for watching as well and listening. And if you found any value in this episode, make sure to like, subscribe, and share with a friend. And also click on the notifications. That way, you'll be notified for the next episode. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.